Welcome, seeker. Moment in every person's life when they wonder, am I truly healing, or have I merely learned to hide my wounds? Today, we shall expose the hidden signs, subtle but powerful, that reveal you have healed far more than you ever dared to believe. If you stay, you will uncover a truth that most people never realize about their own transformation. Listen closely, for what I am about to tell you reveals a truth that only the truly healed will understand. There was a time in your life when every disagreement felt like a battlefield, every opposing opinion a threat to your honor, and every word spoken against you demanded a response. You were a warrior swinging your sword wildly at every shadow, losing sleep over the perception of others, exhausting your mind in conflicts that held no real value. But something has changed within you, and perhaps you haven't even fully realized it. A new strength has begun to take root inside you. A power that is not fueled by rage or defensiveness, but by deeper self-mastery. You no longer rush to win every battle, because you have come to understand something extraordinary. Not every battle deserves your presence, and not every adversary deserves your energy. This realization did not arrive suddenly like thunder shaking the walls of a kingdom. No, it arrived quietly, like a strategist studying the terrain before the war begins. You started to see which conflicts were a threat to your peace, and which were merely distractions, crafted by wounded egos and idle tongues. You discovered that silence does not always signal defeat, and walking away is not surrender. Only the unhealed believe that winning every argument is a demonstration of strength. The healed know that ignoring certain battles is a far greater victory. There was a time when a simple comment, a disrespectful tone, or a minor disagreement would consume your thoughts. You replayed conversations in your mind, imagining the perfect comeback, the perfect line that would prove you were right. But healing showed you that the need to prove yourself is a chain that keeps you enslaved to other people's opinions. Now, you choose differently. You choose peace over proving a point, strategy over reaction, and wisdom over noise. You have freed yourself from the exhausting duty of defending your existence. Make no mistake, this transformation is not weakness. It is the evolution of a ruler who has finally learned when to draw the sword and when to keep it sheathed. As Machiavelli once observed, a wise prince conserves his forces for battles that will change the course of his kingdom, not for petty disputes that only feed the pride of lesser minds. You too have begun to adopt this wisdom. You have realized that your attention, your emotional energy, and your mental clarity are currency, and you will no longer spend them recklessly. You now know which matters deserve your voice and which deserve your silence. You have felt the shift inside you. Arguments that once ignited a fire within you now barely stir a breeze. People who thrive on conflict try to provoke you, yet you do not respond. Not because you are unable to fight, but because you see the trap hidden within the invitation. You understand that some individuals do not seek resolution, they seek chaos. And your growth has made you uninterested in dancing with disorder. You have grown beyond the level where you need to be understood by everyone because you finally understand yourself. Now, when insulted, you do not automatically strike back. You observe, you measure, you consider whether the battle is worthy. And most of the time, you find that it is not. You recognize when a comment is born from ignorance, from jealousy, from insecurity, from fear, none of which require your intervention. You have learned to let people be wrong about you because you no longer build your identity from their opinions. You no longer need to correct every misunderstanding because you are no longer controlled by the desire to be admired or liked. You are becoming sovereign over yourself. Even in moments when you could easily dominate an argument, you choose not to. You restrain yourself not because you have lost your fire, but because you have gained discipline. You no longer treat every disagreement as a battlefield, because you have become the ruler of your emotions rather than a servant to them. This is the quiet authority of someone who has healed more than they know. You now understand that the greatest victories are not won in public displays of dominance, but in private moments where you choose dignity over chaos, self-respect over retaliation, and inner peace over external validation. Some will misinterpret your calm. They will mistake your silence for weakness, your stillness for insecurity, your refusal to engage as avoidance. Let them. Those who have not healed cannot fathom that you are no longer fighting to be seen, heard, or respected. You know what you carry within you, and it is enough. You have retired from meaningless wars and chosen to protect your kingdom, your peace, your mind, your heart, from the ruins of unnecessary conflict. You no longer seek to win every battle, because you have finally learned that a life spent defending yourself is not a life of power, but a life of imprisonment. There comes a point in your evolution when you realize that silence is not the absence of power, but the concentration of it. Once, you might have believed that every misunderstanding required an explanation, every accusation required a defense, every disrespect required a response. You once lived in a world where your tongue was always at the edge of battle, ready to prove your worth to those who never intended to see it. But healing has changed you, though you may not have recognized it yet. The proof is in your newfound understanding of silence. Watch yourself closely. There are moments now when someone speaks to you with arrogance, hoping to trigger you, and yet you remain still. Not frozen, not fearful, but intentional. There was a time when their words would have pierced your heart, a time when you would have stayed awake rehearsing the perfect reply. But now, the storm outside does not shake the walls of your inner kingdom. You hear the noise, but you do not let it enter. Why? Because you have begun to recognize what deserves your silence. And this, my friend, is no small milestone. It is one of the greatest signs that you have healed more than you ever realized. Silence, when chosen, is not passive. Silence is a strategy. Silence is a throne. Silence is a shield that protects you from battles that are beneath the dignity of your spirit. When you choose silence, you are not losing the war. You are refusing to fight a war that offers no reward. Think of the countless times you poured your breath into arguments that led nowhere. Conversations where the goal was not truth, but dominance. Discussions where the other person was never listening, only waiting for their turn to attack. Healing has given you a clarity you once lacked. Some people are not seeking to understand you, they seek to drain you. And now you guard yourself not with walls of anger, but with the gates of silence. There is a silence that is rooted in wisdom. You now know the difference between defending your honor and defending your ego. You have outgrown the need to correct every false story told about you. You have learned that if a person is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explanation will rewrite their narrative. So you choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because your truth no longer requires their approval. Within the mind of a healed soul, silence becomes a form of speech. It says, I do not owe my peace to your confusion. It says, I do not waste energy where it cannot be valued. It says, I know who I am, and I do not require the world to confirm it. This is sovereignty over the self, a mastery many never achieve. Silence is also a mirror. When you stop defending yourself, people are forced to sit alone with their judgments, their assumptions, and the noise of their own thoughts. Sometimes, your silence becomes their teacher. It reveals truths they could never have heard through your arguments. You no longer swing your sword at every provocation, because you understand that your presence alone can be enough to dismantle a lie without you ever speaking a word. And listen well, for this is subtle but true. You are no longer pulled into conversations that insult your intelligence or degrade your spirit. If a discussion cannot elevate you, inspire you, or deepen your understanding, you step away, not with bitterness but with elegance. You walk as one who guards their throne. This shift is not accidental. It comes from pain that taught you what chaos costs. It comes from battles that emptied you. It comes from nights when you felt exhausted because you spent your voice on ears that could not hear you. Healing, then, has taught you the value of silence the same way a kingdom learns the value of peace after centuries of war. There will always be those who misinterpret your silence. They will call you cold, distant, arrogant, or weak. Let them. For their confusion is a price you are willing to pay for your peace. You are no longer performing for an audience who cannot appreciate the brilliance of your growth. True silence is not empty. It is filled with decisions, with clarity, with discipline. You speak now only when your words can move something forward, enlighten a mind, strengthen a boundary, or honor your truth. Anything less does not deserve your voice. So when you find yourself listening to a conversation and realizing you have no need to respond, when someone tries to provoke you and you feel no fire rising to meet them, when you walk away knowing your silence was the sharpest answer you could give, understand this: you have healed. You have changed. You have become someone who chooses peace not because you are afraid of conflict, but because you have mastered the art of choosing what is worthy of your breath and what is not. There was a time in your life when you gave, and gave until you were empty, when you opened your heart without strategy and offered your loyalty to those who had done nothing to earn it. You carried the weight of others, as if it was your responsibility to prevent them from drowning, even when they were the ones pulling you underwater. You fought battles that did not belong to you. You tried to save people who had no intention of saving themselves. You bled emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically for individuals who would not have shed a single drop for you. And back then, you called it love, compassion, loyalty. But now, something within you has shifted. Something has awakened. You no longer bleed for those who would not bleed for you. And this, whether you realize it yet or not, is a monumental sign of healing. Look closely at your present behavior. Notice how you hesitate now before offering yourself fully. Notice how you observe people more carefully, how you study their intentions, how you no longer fall for the sweetness of words without evidence of action. You have learned, often the hard way, that loyalty without discernment is not noble, it is self-destruction. The healed version of you does not sacrifice yourself in hopes of being chosen, loved, or accepted. You know now that any connection requiring you to abandon yourself is not a connection, but a form of captivity. There was a time when you would rush to soothe the others while you were the one bleeding out. You would apologize just to restore peace. Even when you were the one betrayed, you would stay in relationships, romantic, familial, or social, where your kindness was treated as an infinite resource, a river that others believed would never run dry. But it did run dry, and it left you staring at the cracked earth of your own heart, wondering how you had nothing left to give yourself. But healing is a ruthless teacher. It forces you to examine the ruins and realize that you were never meant to be a martyr for the ungrateful. The healed you now recognizes that love is not proven by how much pain you endure for others. True loyalty does not require you to destroy yourself. You have learned that it is not your job to rescue anyone who refuses to swim, nor your duty to save those who would watch you drown. You now carry your heart more wisely. You give, but you give with awareness. You love, but you love with boundaries. You help, but you help without abandoning yourself. You can still be generous, compassionate, devoted, but you will no longer allow your empathy to be used against you like a weapon. You know now that your heart is not a battlefield for other people's unresolved wars. And when someone asks for your time, your energy, or your loyalty, you no longer feel obligated to say yes. You measure their character. You observe how they treat you when you have nothing to give them. You look for reciprocity, not perfection, but effort, consistency, sincerity. And if you do not find it, you walk away, not in anger, but in self-respect. There are people who once had unlimited access to you who now find your distance strange. They do not understand why you no longer respond instantly, why you no longer sacrifice sleep, why you no longer rearrange your life to accommodate their chaos. They call it coldness. They call it change. And they are right. You have changed. You have learned to protect the throne of your heart because you finally realized it is not a public courtyard where anyone may enter and take what they please. You do not hate them. In truth, you may still care for some of them deeply, but care without self-protection is a kingdom without walls, and you will never again allow yourself to be conquered so easily. You are healing. You are changing. You are learning to give only to those who give in return, not out of transaction, but out of mutual respect. You have traded self-sacrifice for self-honor. You have replaced people-pleasing with discernment. You have let go of the belief that love means suffering. You no longer mislabel neglect as loyalty. You no longer call manipulation devotion. You no longer confuse pain with purpose. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that you no longer resent the past version of yourself who gave too much. You understand now that you were not weak, you were hopeful. You were not foolish, you were generous. You were not broken, you were learning. And now you are wiser for it. So when you notice that you do not chase anymore, that you do not explain yourself repeatedly to someone who does not listen, that you no longer pour yourself into relationships where your presence is taken for granted, understand this. You have healed more than you ever realized. You no longer bleed for those who would not bleed for you. There comes a season in your evolution, a silent but profound turning of the inner world, when you wake up and realize that the things you once clung to no longer command your spirit. The people you were terrified to lose, the opportunities you believed would never return, the comfort you wrapped yourself in like armor. All of it begins to loosen its grip on you. Something in you has changed, and changed deeply. You do not fear loss in the way you once did, and the moment you notice this, even faintly, know that it is not indifference, it is healing. Once you tried to control every outcome, to bend the world into something that could not disappoint you. You held tightly to relationships, even when they drained you, because you feared loneliness more than mistreatment. You clung to opportunities that were killing your spirit because you believed they were your only chance. You stayed in comfort zones long after they became prisons because stepping into the unknown felt like walking into the jaws of fate. You feared endings because you did not trust that life could give you new beginnings. But now observe yourself. Something has shifted. When someone pulls away, you do not chase with the same desperation. When an opportunity slips through your fingers, you do not crumble. When life requires you to step beyond what is familiar, you do not tremble as you once did. You have started to understand that loss does not always come to break you. Sometimes it comes to shape you, and perhaps you have not yet fully admitted it, but deep within you is a growing certainty. Anything or anyone that can be taken from your life without destroying your destiny was never the foundation of it. You have begun to see what the unhealed heart cannot see. You have begun to understand that the world, in all its cruelty and brilliance, is not finished giving to you. There was a time when you believed that you lost was irreplaceable, but healing has shown you that life has a way of returning what is meant for you in a form more aligned with your growth. What left did not leave because you were unworthy. It left because your story required space for a new chapter. Feel the difference. You no longer negotiate your worth out of fear that someone will walk away. You no longer betray your values to keep the peace. You do not force friendships, cling to fading relationships, or chase those who treat you like an afterthought. You have seen what happens when you beg for closeness. You shrink, you diminish, you abandon yourself, and you refuse to do that anymore. Your peace is no longer a bargaining chip. Your self-respect is no longer for sale. You also understand now that opportunities are not singular. You know that life is not a one-door hallway where a single misstep destroys your future. You can sense that what is meant for you does not require manipulation, pleading, or desperation. You can feel that your path may twist, shift, break, and rebuild, but it will never deny you what you are prepared to receive. The healed version of you has begun to trust timing in ways you never could before. You have learned to let doors close. You have learned to let people exit. You have learned to allow transformations instead of fearing them. You have learned that comfort was not always comfort. It was sometimes stagnation disguised as safety. And now, when life pushes you toward unfamiliar roads, you do not interpret it as punishment. You interpret it as preparation. The healed version of you knows that loss is not always the enemy. Loss is often the invitation. Loss is the clearing of old roots to make space for what will nourish you instead of deplete you. You know now that you do not need to grip something to prove its value. If it is meant to remain, it will remain. And if it does not, you will not collapse as you once did, because you have built your foundation on something stronger than attachment. You have built it on growth. Others may not recognize this new power within you. They may say you are detached, distant, uncaring, but you know the truth. You care deeply, perhaps more than you ever have, but you no longer confuse love with possession, opportunity with destiny, or comfort with life. You have stopped worshiping the temporary. You do not fear the ending of a chapter because you trust the author of the story you are living. And if you sense this shift, this calm, this quiet, this inner assurance that what leaves you is not your loss but your liberation, understand what it means. You have healed. You have transformed. You have stepped into a realm of strength where fear of loss no longer commands your decisions, where attachment no longer traps you, where endings no longer threaten you, because deep in your soul you have learned something most people never understand. Until it is too late, nothing meant for you must be forced, and nothing you lose by being true to yourself was ever yours to keep. And now, as we reach the end of this discourse, let us observe what these revelations have quietly built within you. You began this journey believing healing was some grand declaration, some triumphant march through the gates of your life. Yet what we have uncovered together is something far more subtle, far more powerful. Healing did not arrive like a conquering army. It arrived like a strategist in the dark, repositioning the pieces of your soul until you became unrecognizable to the version of yourself that once suffered so loudly. You no longer draw your sword for every battle, because you have discovered that peace is not the absence of war, but the mastery of when to fight and when to continue forward untouched. You have learned that silence, when wielded with intention, is not retreat but dominance, an unspoken declaration that your energy is not freely given to chaos. You have stepped away from the draining ritual of bleeding for those who would never sacrifice for you, and in doing so, reclaim the loyalty that was always meant to begin with yourself. No longer do you beg to be valued. No longer do you mistake suffering for devotion. Your heart, once used against you, is now guarded by discernment. And finally, you have loosened your grip on the world. You have stopped fearing the loss of people, opportunities, and comfort, because you have tasted the freedom that comes from trusting your own becoming. You understand now that what leaves you does not define you, and what stays does not imprison you. You do not cling. You do not chase. You choose. So if ever you wonder, have I truly healed? Remember, this healing is not proven by how loudly you rise, but by how little you fear falling again. It is felt in the battles you no longer fight, the words you no longer speak, the wounds you no longer reopen. It is found in your restraint, in your silence, in your boundaries, and in your faith that life will continue to reveal what is meant for you without requiring the sacrifice of your soul. You are no longer who you were, not because the world changed, but because you did. And though you may not see it in mirrors or hear it from others, there is a quiet power moving through you now. An authority earned not by avoiding pain, but by surviving it and refusing to let it rule you. You have healed more than you ever realized.